Hey there, I'm Sarah Holbrook. I'm the Executive Director of the Pinhead Institute here in Telluride, Colorado, and the lucky person who gets to interview the mayor, Sean Murphy.
Hi Sarah, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Doing well, thanks.
So we have just a couple days before the election.
Five more days.
People might be watching this after the election, but let's go through some of the stuff initially. Let's just, get down, because you were saying you had some meetings and you've had some great things explained to you, so
good idea.
There's a lot of things on the ballot. Let's try to get through those, kind of briefly, because people might be watching this after the election and it might have already been taken care of.
Not to speak for other organizations, but there are clearly a lot of local community and special district organizations that are on the ballot this year.
Yeah, there's
hospital,
a mental health, the school, fire district,
medical center.
Yes, medical center.
And then the town. So the town has 3 ballot measures that are on the ballot this time. Actually, they relate to 2 items for funding affordable housing. So one is a sales tax increase, so taking the current half-cent sales tax and doubling it by another half-cent. And then also something new that we've never done before, which is potentially taxing property. So a property tax that would be dedicated for affordable housing funding, that would be a 2 mil rate. So effectively that translates into, for every $100,000 of value that you have as your assessed value, you would pay an additional $14 a year for that amount per $100,000.
So if you have a $1 million house, you pay
$140.
$140.
Yeah.
I did the math.
144. It's like $14.40, but nobody's being exact here.
That's 2 mils.
So
that's 2 mils does. Okay.
And then the half-a-cent sales tax would effectively double our current half-cent revenue stream, which is about $750,000 every year. So currently, just to back up for a second, if the community wants this, let's talk about magnitude of what the outcome would be. And that is, currently we do have a half-a-cent sales tax that produces about $750,000 every year for
meaning the town
housing.
of Telluride has a
Telluride.
a cent or half a percent of sales tax.
Correct.
And that's the only sales tax that we have.
No, we actually have 4 cents more. So the total town sales tax is 4.5 cents today.
And
so
1/2 of that goes, a half cent goes to affordable housing. Got it.
You got it.
So we already have 4.5. This would make it 5.
Correct.
And then plus whatever the
plus
federal
the rest of
the
state, and then we have a smart sales tax as well. So it would take our aggregate rate from 8.65% to 9.15%. Then if you're dining in a restaurant or drinking at a bar, there's an additional 2% excise tax that goes for the airline guarantee program.
Oh, got it.
So you'd see on your bar bill a 10.65 percentage rate. That would go up to 11.15 or whatever. And then if you were staying at a hotel, there's yet another additional 2% lodging tax on top of that, which goes to the Telluride Marketing Organization, the tourism board. That would then bring your top rate from presently 12.65 on lodging up to 13.15.
Got it.
So
by adding
that brings us pretty much toward the top of other comparable Colorado communities, mountain towns especially. We don't want to really get too aggressive, so we feel like no more than a half a cent would be the reasonable increase. So if we were able to augment the current revenue stream, the new taxes would bring in, there'd be an extra $750 coming from the half-cent sales tax, and there'd be about $544,000 estimated from the property tax. So that would effectively double our current $1.2 million revenue stream every year to about 2.4. So this could allow us to do some more things quickly. So there was a progressive women's
town.
There was a progressive women's caucus on October 30th, and so I spoke on behalf of these 2 ballot measures for the town. Other representatives for the other organizations explained and presented on theirs. Some of the questions that came up during that were, are we allowed to take that money and spend it outside of the town of Telluride, or must it stay inside the town? The answer is the former. We are allowed to take it. For example, the next project that we envision doing is a joint venture with the county next to the Idle Creek condominium complex.
Down before the second traffic circle.
And so this would give us a huge leg up, because the town's contribution to that project is basically to pay for the construction of all the housing, which would be about 20 units on that site. So that would give us, a good amount. The other backstory to really tell is, during the recession, we slowed and then we stopped our town construction of affordable housing for obvious reasons. We then built up, coming out of the recession, about $2.5 million of reserves dedicated only for affordable housing. So you've seen those reserves in action. $1 million of those reserves went into the Virginia Plaster Project. More than $1 million will go into the SMPA project with the 10 units of affordable housing there that are being, the ground is being at least restored now, and the decks for the 2 streets are being poured. So we're getting closer to having some real shape that's taking shape at that site. And then another $1 million+ subsidy is going into the Lot B, the 16 townhomes that we'll start construction on. Actually, we've started moving dirt,
yes, I've seen
and we're doing
things
utility
moving down
work
there.
over there right now.
Sure, and that's by the Pearl Street property.
So the
right
takeaway
off
from all that
Mahoney.
is three great projects, but our resources then are very depleted. So we're projected, even with revenue stream coming in regularly from the half-cent sales tax, we're thinking that by the end of 2019, we'll be down to about $700,000 in the bank for restricted to affordable housing. So we would love to, since our average subsidy is $1 million+, we would love to be able to then get the next project fired up and started.
Sure.
So,
this could
it's
fund
up to the
some of that.
community. So people, will have to decide, vote your values, and we'll see what happens after November 6th. So,
Interesting. Okay.
but
good.
certainly it's not going to be, one of the questions that was asked at the Progressive Women's Caucus was, what if your measure doesn't pass? And so my answer to that was, well, we'll obviously keep doing what we can. We just won't be able to build as much as quickly as if we had these additional revenue sources. So those are the ballot measures. The other thing of great importance to the town of Telluride, and that people really need to stop, pause, and ponder, is this Amendment 74 to the state constitution. We did a work session, and then we had an action item related to that. The town council at our October 16th meeting passed a resolution in opposition to proposed constitutional amendment number 74. This is a very benign sounding amendment that changes the methodology. So the current state of affairs, which we all we've lived personally with the Valley Floor, is when you have the government taking property, then they're supposed to provide just compensation. That's the language that's been in our Colorado Constitution since 1876. So what's being proposed today is actually taking that and revising it to say any decrease in fair market value to your private property, you have a right to file a claim against the municipality, the county, the state. So the cautionary tale here is Oregon did this in 2004. Their voters adopted similar language. Yes, they actually repealed it 4 years later because it did so much damage and drained the coffers of local and state government. Because in their case, they had a similar benign sounding, any diminishment in fair market value. There are no exceptions to that. So, for example, if we're doing regulations for health or safety or zoning for, let's say we want to build an affordable housing project somewhere, those are not exempt. So anytime then we take government action, any property owner can claim that's in whatever vicinity to wherever we've imposed this regulation, oh wait, you've diminished my fair market value and therefore you owe me. So in Oregon, there were over $19 billion of claims filed against municipalities and the state.
19 with a
billion.
B. Billion.
Of which 4.6 billion was awarded by courts. So if you spread that out and you project that reality for Colorado, this is actually a disaster for every government agency or entity, because it stops us from actually doing our job of doing good for the public and regulating where necessary and providing for basic health, welfare, and safety issues. And it will drain our resources. So we'll have to defend. Thank goodness Telluride is not as litigious as Aspen, but one need only look, a short distance away to see where their citizens are constantly suing in the current structure. If we open the floodgates for this sort of thing, Amendment 74 is going to have a devastating financial impact on communities, and we're all at risk. So the takeaway is, please. I personally voted against it. I have strong feelings against it, but please don't be fooled by simple language, because it's really a measure that's been advanced by the oil and gas industry, and it's a punishment or a get even to Boulder and other communities on the Front Range that have regulated fracking, and they have imposed limits and setbacks. Of course, there's another measure on the ballot about that. And in that case, these oil and gas industries' interests have decided, we're going to come in and we're going to establish a brand new standard so we can come back after you, Boulder, back after you, Louisville, and get compensated for the fact that you won't let us extract and be so extreme in our in the processes. So it's a very dangerous measure, and it's really not being advanced with good intentions. It's being advanced as a revenge intention.
Wow.
So anyway, that's a bright and happy,
Yeah,
cheery way
yeah,
to start
yeah,
our
yeah.
interview.
Sure, but get out and vote, whatever your
Yep,
vote is.
exactly.
Definitely do that. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Now, there's two different things, one at the local level for A that will help fund the school for teacher salaries, and then there's also a statewide initiative. Is it
That's Amendment 73.
73,
So
okay.
I voted
So-
yes on both of
Right, I
those.
was going to say, just to be clear with our viewers, that that you could vote yes to both of them, and one would then supersede the other. You wouldn't get double taxed if they both pass. That's
Okay,
just like a little
that's-
public service announcement.
You're right. That point was made by Stephanie Hatcher at the
Yeah.
Progressive Women's Caucus.
And not everybody would understand that. They might
That's
think, oh,
true.
I should vote for this. I won't vote for that because I don't want to be double taxed. It doesn't happen. If they both
Yeah.
pass, then actually the one supersedes the other. So you're in good shape.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So what's
Well-
going on with the town of Telluride?
Well, let's see. I have happy news to report on the sales tax and actually property tax front. You know, we've been pretty much flat
Yeah.
on the sales tax basis. With the numbers that just came in for the whole month of September, we are now 3% ahead of where we were last year. So that's pretty much our slow, steady pattern
Yeah.
over time. It's single-digit increases every year, and so it's good to see that despite certain things that, you know, happened, fires and smoke and whatnot this
Yeah.
summer, or a
Or
poor
bad,
winter.
bad snow.
We're at least poised to come in pretty much, you know, as expected and a little ahead of there. On the real estate transfer tax, that's actually the better news. We had the strongest real estate transfer tax collections. Over $1 million in transfer tax was collected in the month of September.
Wow.
So we are sitting just 3% below where we were last year. So many of us have been fretting over, gosh, you know, you never know. It just depends on individual sales, and we really have no control over that.
Yeah.
But it seems like our real estate market engine, whatever you want to call it, is continuing to perform and produce a pretty good, reliable revenue stream. And as we always talk about, those revenues go for capital.
Right.
Real estate transfer tax is for capital projects, and our sales tax goes to fund our general fund, which is all your basic services.
Right,
That's
keeping the lights on, the people in
Paying
town
salary,
hall, that kind
yeah.
of thing. Yeah. So what are the capital projects that are on the books?
Well, the most important thing that we're going to be doing this next year is the spur. We're going to resurface the spur again. The current top coat, or for lack of whatever the better technical term is, was put on about 7 years ago. We thought it had about a 4 to 5 year life. We've been able to eke out a bit more, but what we have to be careful of, and what we're starting to see is where that's breaking apart, if you let the substrate erode, then you have to rebuild, and that's
Right.
a lot more expensive. That's probably a $10 million fix. So we're taking just, I think it's 1.1 million is our really biggest price tag thing for next year, and that is to resurface the spur,
Wow.
so that we keep that.
So you do one lane open, one lane closed, and just traffic will be
Right.
stopped.
Whereas
and
if we had to
alternated.
rebuild it, where
Yeah.
would traffic go? I mean, it would be incredibly, it will be very disruptive when that happens at some point.
But it probably
it's
isn't
not
that
happening.
long of a time period that it would take.
I would hope not, but you know, imagine a 6 to 9 month project. I'm not an engineer, but even if you had 6 months of, you know, a lot of disruption here, that could have a very negative impact on visitor visits and our
Yeah.
sales tax correspondingly, since about half our sales tax is derived from visitors.
Wow.
Visitors and second homeowners who are not here very often. So that's something where we know we have to keep on top of it,
Right.
and no pun intended,
Yeah,
and
keep
also
on top of it, exactly.
keep it in good
But no, that's what
repair.
I'm saying. Keeping it on top of it in good repair would not be a long job compared to the redoing the substrate, et cetera.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The substrate would be a much more time-consuming and disruptive process.
Yeah.
We've actually, in the spirit of like being super conservative too, we've looked ahead and projected less revenue from sales tax, less revenue, well, slightly more revenue from sales tax next year, and less revenue than we projected this year. About 10% less for real estate transfer tax, and we've squeezed our corresponding sort of wish lists of our department heads, accordingly put off a few projects, and really have tried to effectively manage about $2 million of other capital projects
Yeah.
that aren't going to be happening in 2019 because we need to be cautious and we need to be circumspect at this
Are there
point.
capital projects that are happening now? I feel like they're digging for fiber. Am I wrong about that? Some of the
That's true
streets have
too.
been,
You
dug
might recall
up.
about 3 months ago, Public Works came to the town council and said, hey, we have a person who's installing fiber in these other contexts just right outside of town. There's a Region 10 grant that's bringing fiber from Sunshine down here to the second rotary. And then we're also seeing a state project that's helping connect from Sunshine back to Norwood. And so we decided that while those guys are in our midst,
the vicinity,
we would go ahead and say, hey, why don't you go through the following, South Davis Street, down those parallel alleys then, and then trench so that we have the ability to, and then we've put conduit down, so that ultimately the goal with that is we'll have hopefully third-party providers competing to provide high-speed internet service here in town, and they'll be able to snake their fiber through the conduit, and it won't be limited to just one or two providers. And so the town's strategy is we're going to do a multi-year project of this nature. Wherever we can, we're going to get things ready so that when we do have appropriate last mile fiber that comes to us, that we can light up a lot more of the town without.
So that's been happening now.
That's been happening sort of progressively over the last few months, and I think they're still working in a couple of areas in town. But it's been something where we're trying to get as much of that project done before the real snow flies.
Right.
So so that's been going on. What else have we been doing? There's actually, starting in September, we've been doing the Phase 2 development of the Town Park Stage. So you
I
may
haven't been out
recall-
that way. Yeah, it's going to be what, toilets and a catering kitchen?
Public restrooms, a catering kitchen,
Very
and also
exciting.
we did not finish for whatever reason. Well, I know the reason. The 2014 Town Council decided that they didn't want to spend the full amount in 1 year, so they broke the project into 2 phases. So the $2.5 million phase that we see as the
Beautiful
bright,
new
shiny,
big
beautiful
stage,
stage was completed in 2015. Then we've now. For 2018, we had already budgeted an additional $1.5 million to do the rest of it. So part of that includes finishing off the spaces below the stage, which were designed to be dressing rooms, which were designed to be other restrooms for performance folks and whatnot. So that's all happening as we speak. So that should be done before next festival season starts
great.
at the latest. But I think you'll see progress made through the spring. I think probably the best guess is when that'll be done.
Yeah.
So, but we've on the story about putting off capital improvements, Parks and Rec requested about $400,000 to do an expansion of the existing Henley rink, so that we would have dressing rooms for visiting teams, which we don't. Apparently, we just hang curtains in the lobby, and people sort of dart in and out. And so ultimately, that will happen. It's just it won't be happening in 2019. We decided that was one of those things that we could put off at this point and just wait and see and make sure that we don't overspend and that we keep our reserves. Reserves are another story. Our general fund, for example, last year we had about 35%. Actually, it turned out to be almost 39% reserve. We targeted a 30% reserve. This next year going forward, we're targeting a 25% reserve. So we're sort of keeping less of a cushion because we know we have we need to dip into that a little bit to get things done and keep things moving.
Right.
So, but all in all, the budgetary process, you'll see the next meeting, Town Council, will be November 13th, followed by December 4th. So those 2 meetings, there'll be a budget ordinance that we'll take up. So the public will have opportunity to come and weigh in, and it's not set in concrete, no pun intended. So it can be, things can be tweaked depending on public input.
Yeah. Any upcoming public meetings that we should know about with regard to, I don't know, real estate or something like that? I mean, oftentimes there are kind of like community sessions where you get to show up and talk about whatever it is that's maybe going to be on the ballot, but that's all behind us now.
Yeah, really not. I think it's just we're moving into a quieter period. This is typical end of the year sort of balancing and reconciling and plan and budgeting for the following year. So. What else? I'm trying to think of what else is coming up on we have a number of work sessions on different items. One thing that's not going to happen in November, but hopefully we'll start the conversation in December or January, is the idea that the profit from the sale of alcohol at our festivals my opinion and several other, I think, members of council share this opinion, needs to stay local. And so we've had other communities like Avon who've recently adopted ordinances that require certain of the monies be reserved for a subset of beneficiaries within a regional footprint. And so I think that would be a great idea for Telluride as well. You know, many of us can sort of point to the fact that, well, we have large impacts from some of these festivals, and so really if the money has to go to nonprofits, it really should stay local. So
Has it gone to outside Telluride nonprofits before
there
now?
are no restrictions under the current contracts that have been negotiated with these various festival
As
promoters.
someone who runs a Telluride nonprofit, I'd be interested in seeing what happens with that.
Well,
That's a work session?
I think you hopefully will be a beneficiary ultimately of the Pinhead Institute and other good, worthy local groups. That's the idea, is we need to make sure that this money doesn't go to the Front Range to nonprofits. You could theoretically, as a promoter, you could set up your own nonprofit for anything you want, any charitable purpose, and then basically take this Telluride sourced revenue and use it to, you know.
I know Planet Bluegrass, you know, maybe has 4 nights, and the tip cup for each night, they all get pooled and then divided between 4 nonprofits, but each night the nonprofit, you know, puts their name on the can for the tips and everything, and it's Kodo, and it was the Carbon Neutral Coalition of which we're part, and I'm not sure who the other 2 beneficiaries were, but I'm pretty sure they're all local. But it might be other vendors or other festivals, and I'm not sure how the
Well, I mean,
finances
that's just the tips. There's profit on the sale of the alcohol, and that profit stays in the Telluride Bluegrass booth, or what, TBB Inc., or their nonprofit. But we don't get, our liquor licensing authority hearing officer, Lois Major, has been doing a very dedicated job this past year of when she issues liquor licenses for these big special events. She requires them to, you know, provide an accounting of where their monies went. But based on that is where we're seeing, that's going out of the community.
And
we
maybe it should
probably would
stay
like
here.
it to stay here.
Yeah.
So that'll be something to definitely gear up for and participate in. You and every other nonprofit in this community.
Yeah, exactly. That'll be in December.
There are only
you said?
180 of us or something, or
There's a
of you
lot.
guys, yeah.
There are
So,
a lot. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And really, you guys do the work that government can't and doesn't. So we can't and shouldn't, in some cases, do these sort of things. But it's great to have these organizations like Pinhead and others that really look out for the best interests of kids, or look out for the best interests of other
I just
worthy
left our
members.
library, which is such a great nonprofit, or public entity anyhow, and they were having a Dia de Muertos Day there. So all these different arts and crafts, and we brought in our sugar skulls that were cut out with our laser cutter for Pinhead, and the kids are decorating them, and they're making flower crowns, and it's terrific over there. So San Miguel Resource Center is there, and the library.
Well, I shouldn't say this out loud, but my sister's visiting me, and so she's been doing some work, and she's like, wow, she lives in Durango. She's like, the Durango Library charges to scan and fax, but, you know, or scan and email, but we don't here. So she was off to the library about a half hour ago.
Oh, that's right, with a big stack of stuff to scan.
So don't change that policy. That's a good thing.
Oh, they're wonderful there.
So they truly are. I mean, Sarah and her entire team just does such a huge service for all of us. And in fact, it was really odd. I just got an email 48 hours ago saying, your library card will expire in 14 days. In 6-7 years, I've never received that before.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether they have a 6-year duration maybe for,
That's
for
funny.
the card.
Yeah.
So, but it said, just call this number. So I spoke to a nice gentleman named Hank, and he got my card apparently re-upped for another however many years
how
that's
nice.
valid. So
Yeah.
anyway, they're very service-minded
Yeah,
as well.
they really are. Absolutely, yeah.
Truly.
What else do you want to talk about? I have questions from the community, but I want to
Well,
make
the
sure
last
that
item that one of the other important things that happened at this October 16th
Oh,
Town
sure,
Council
yeah.
meeting was that the town of Telluride, you know the big buses that go to Norwood, the large extended, like the giant school bus edition thing that's painted the gold? The town of Telluride is effectively selling them at a very low cost to Smart. So because Smart has taken over, is paying for
Right,
those routes
is that route?
already.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
we figured it's time for that equipment to follow that.
And then
So-
they can own that equipment, and then they can trade it in for
for
electric
replacement
buses. Yes.
And actually, at the most recent Smart board meeting, David Averill, the executive
wonderful
director,
guy.
gave us. I know he's just a gem.
Yeah.
We are so lucky to have him.
We really are.
And so don't ever leave. We were discussing with him, he's been very closely following sort of the performance of electric buses in the colder climates. And he is fairly confident after going to a large industry national meeting that we're probably a year away from better batteries that are actually going to be very functional in our environment. So the first movers in the other mountain communities, like I think Park City is one of them that's gone there already, they've had some issues and some hiccups with that. And they're having to modify the guts of these buses to provide heaters.
To keep the battery warm.
And they're diesel-powered heaters to keep the battery warm.
Right, that's not
so
so
that's
green.
really not the ideal outcome.
Exactly.
And so we're hoping that
let's have them modify them in the garage and then sell them to us.
Let's just get a better battery that can self-warm or whatever is necessary at these conditions. But anyway, you're right. You're exactly right. Smart now owns that brings the total to 3 vehicles that Smart owns, all of which have probably service lives of maybe 2 to 3 more years, and so all of which qualify for the CDOT replacement program, because CDOT does not generally give you grants to just go out and buy more incremental buses.
Right, but you can replace something that's timing
so much
out.
easier.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's terrific news, and that's next step. I shouldn't be saying this, but Smart has been paying for since last year the Lawson service.
Oh yeah.
And so it's probably time for the town to consider whether or not some of the geese that run out to Lawson that Smart is paying us to do, whether or not those vehicles now need to be
owned by Smart also.
Owned by Smart. Yes.
I love that the Lawson. The buses go so much more often now. It's so convenient for everyone.
That was our hope. And so
we have to get ready for these electric buses. The Rico bus is going,
In fact, we're going to buy another bus for Rico too.
Oh, great.
So
but so we have to prepare for the electric vehicles that we're going to get by having clean energy. And so I know that SMPA just voted against building a solar plant at Arugla.
I actually, strange that you mentioned this, I had lunch today with Mr. Zaporsky, who's the chief executive officer of SMPA. And what was explained to me was Tri-State did not choose that particular project because it was a competitive bid situation, and that investor group identified that location and put forth a proposal.
That was fully funded.
SMPA but I think SMPA would have had to, and Tri-State would have had to have made some financial contribution to that. And so I think the issue was there were other competing proposals that were less cost, that were also 100% renewable. And so my understanding is that the likelihood is within either southeast Colorado or northern New Mexico that SMPA is going to do a project, irregardless of whether we get something here, which is not, the door's not slammed shut on that yet either. That was part of the second part of the conversation I had with Mr. Zaporsky. He's actually a very good faith partner. When you talk to him, he's very well connected with the CEOs of Kit Carson, which is the cooperative that left Tri-State, with Delta Montrose Electric Cooperative that wants to get out, and also La Plata County. The La Plata Cooperative is looking to do the same thing. So he's very sensitive. He understands the issues, and so they definitely get that we want a renewable power generation source inside of our footprint.
Right, and where the people need our help. I mean, it doesn't help us if we're in New Mexico. If the people of Nuclea's coal-fired power plant is shutting down.
Do one. If the town of Telluride, the town of Mountain Village, Ophir, San Miguel County, and I think there's one more entity, if we and SMPA can pool the right resources, so I don't mean to
we can't.
I don't mean to out anybody, but I know that Mr. Zaporsky's already talked to Mayor Benitez in Mountain Village, and she's generally very supportive of this. What we're going to be doing in executive session, probably in December, is running through what if we applied a certain portion, if not all, of the current excise tax that we collect on your power bills, and what if we put all of that toward that? And could we, in effect, it's one of those things of should we put our money where our mouth is, and shouldn't we really devote resources that we have? Now, there may be a need for a little bit more than just that 3% franchise fee that needs to get diverted in that direction, and this would be a multi-year thing. And so the town there is some sort of, we would have to work out how this would happen, because one town council can't commit a town council 8 years hence to a certain thing, but they need to have probably a 20-year stream of payments coming
Right.
out. But I really think the town of Telluride and the town of Mountain Village and these
Yes, we
communities,
should get out there
we
in
should-
front.
we should do whatever we need to do to get
Yes.
ourselves in the financial position to be able to be a funder
Yeah.
for a project of exactly that nature.
I'm sitting up
So,
straight. I'm getting excited about the possibilities.
um,
Yes, this is in December. We'll have a conversation about that.
We'll have one behind closed doors.
Ah.
First, the franchise committee, which is Councilperson Todd Brown,
Mm-hmm.
Attorney Kevin Geiger, and myself, will meet. I'll share the information that I got today with them.
Mm-hmm.
We'll probably, our agenda is pretty well set for the 4th, so this would be, December 4th, not November 13th.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
That we'll
got it,
have,
yeah.
we'll bring it to the full town council behind closed doors and go, okay, guys.
Okay, what do you think?
How
Yeah.
do we scrape together X?
Yeah.
And what are our options for doing that?
Mm-hmm.
So this can be a little sensitive because obviously we've just been through the budget process and everybody's biting their fingernails going, oh,
Yeah.
and now to have a new ask come into the midst. But that's the way the world works. And
That's
that's our
how it
job.
works,
That's what we're supposed to
exactly.
do. We're supposed to make
Gotta
these
be nimble.
trade-offs and we're supposed to figure out, okay, if this is the real goal of the community to be 100% carbon neutral,
Yeah, how are we going to get there?
how do we get there? And that is a definite, that is a complete and total possibility. So don't worry that Tri-State did not pick that particular competitive bid at that location because we can still drive that reality.
Okay,
And it
good.
won't be mutually exclusive. They'll
Okay,
go on
good.
and do their thing wherever they do it,
Okay.
whether it's Southeast Colorado or Northern New Mexico. That does not exclude us from our cooperative and our 4 or 5 key communities saying, okay, we're going to put our money where our mouth is and we're going to do this.
Excellent.
So stay tuned and don't be,
I just think time is running out.
SMPA is not necessarily on the wrong side of this issue. They are actually
Right.
trying to
Oh, I know that.
figure
Yeah,
out
yeah.
how to get us to where we want to be
Mm-hmm.
and to advance our community value.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but
Meanwhile, we didn't have any
stinky,
winter
nasty
last
coal
year.
is awful, and
Yeah.
the quicker that stuff comes out of the system, the better.
Right,
But,
exactly. But it'd be nice to be able to replace those communities' jobs with something in clean power, so.
True enough.
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. So anything else? Because I have a few questions
No,
from the
go
community.
ahead, fire away.
Okay,
There's no
so
more
first of all, one question
headlines.
is, how many construction projects are going on in town right now? Do you know? Speed round.
I don't know the exact number. We could find out very easily by going to the planning department,
Uh-huh.
and the director of the planning department will know, and that's currently Amy Levick.
Ah, okay.
Not to out her, put her cell number out there, but everyone who
Let's
has
call
it.
Amy. No, but aren't there a lot? I mean, everywhere you turn,
Well-
it seems like there's a new construction project.
Obviously, the town has been guilty of that with
Yeah.
Fur and Pacific, with our Virginia Placer project, which was a little kind of out of sight, out of mind
Yeah,
for many
yeah.
people. These other ones are not out of sight.
Right.
So it's top of mind for many people.
Yeah.
And when we start in earnest on the 16 townhomes at the Lot B, at the RV lot
Yeah,
location,
sure.
that
Well,
will
it already
be-
looks like construction
that
now.
will
You
be
see
disruptive to the
backhoes,
neighbors over there. So,
Yeah. Should we just
you
say
know,
the
it's
answer
going
is
to be
lots?
well worth it. It's lots.
Hey, I'm from Brooklyn. I
It's-
like houses right next to me.
I would say it's more than 10,
Yeah.
less than 100.
Okay, good. We'll go with that. Another question from the community is, there seems to be times when special interests can park in the middle of the main street. You know, there's that lane in the middle of
Right.
Main Street that's commercial trucks.
It's
If
commercial,
you're a commercial
and
and
you
you,
have to have
pay
a
by the
permit
year,
for
you have a
that.
permit, exactly. And the trucks that come and go all the time do that. But then there seems like there's sometimes for film festival, for example.
I was just about to cite that
exactly.
example.
And do they buy a special short-term, middle-of-the-road parking permit, or are they just kind of squatting there? Or what's
They
the-
actually do get a formal, they have it in their contract with the town as
Right.
part of their use of town property. So when they're using the town park, for example, or the Elks Park, they'll have a master agreement with us. And part of that agreement has previously been, it does not have to stay this way, has been you're allowed to, park your official vehicles in the center lane.
Right.
Not every festival or event asks for that. It is a possibility. It's not limited to just them. So if there were other
Well, so
users
this,
that wanted
this,
to do
this
that,
citizen suggested that we continue to collect from the special interests who get to park in the middle of the street. And then for a few weeks during off-season, the regular citizens don't get charged to park at the curb.
it's funny you mention that because I just had that question yesterday, and this is something that I'll confirm with Lance McDonald. But my understanding is our bright, shiny new parking garage that's under construction at the corner of Fur and Pacific. We pledged all the parking meter revenue from Main Street and everything to be metered inside of that garage to the bond that we raised. I think it was a $4.6 million bond. So I think that, in fact, I'll out her. It was Mayor Benitez that brought it up. We have lunch every month together, and so she was. We were kind of talking about parking in both communities, and the fact that she said, "Wouldn't it be a great idea if we just didn't charge for parking in the off season?" And I said, "Well, yes, but we do have to service this bond, so we would need to check the bond covenants to see whether we would be allowed to do that." My suspicion is, even if we were allowed to do it, we might hesitate to do it because we need to service that debt.
Right.
And so we have interest payments and principal payments on $4.6 million that we're going to be paying out over the next 15 years.
Wow.
So I don't want to promise in year 16 that you can park for free, but the idea is that that revenue is actually going toward this other asset that the town will own forever.
Right.
So not a bad idea. The other thing that, not to just populate the atmosphere with this idea. Someone else asked me recently, why don't you stripe the exact spaces on Main Street so that people don't kind of get hoggy and they park within.
Well, I was shocked to hear that there's a law that says you can't park closer than 2 feet. I'm like, who needs 2 feet on each side of your bumper?
Is that a municipal ordinance?
Somebody got a ticket for parking too close. I'm like, there's no such thing as too close. You should get within 2 inches.
Yeah, especially living in New York, we know that.
Exactly.
That's a waste of valuable parking space.
I know. I was shocked to read it. So we'll have to
I am surprised by that
revisit
too.
that. You'll have to ask your town attorney.
Well, the town manager is the one who actually manages he has all the authority for like the parking permits and those sort of things. And so
check with him.
If we need to make an adjustment in our municipal ordinance for that seems like I'm having lunch with him tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't know about the striping. People never park within the lines, but just like they don't draw within the lines.
At least a visual clue. And then maybe maximizing. The idea was just to maximize the number of vehicles that could be parked at one time.
Right.
So
I'm always looking at that.
I think that that's worthy. But the other point,
I found that shocking.
I wouldn't say flabbergasted, but I'm surprised.
I was shocked.
Okay.
And then the final question from the community is, why don't we have a vacancy tax? I didn't even know there was such a thing. I guess apparently if you live in another nice ski town and you're not in your house but 3 times a year or something like that, you pay an extra tax for the ability to own the house and keep it dark except for when you want to be there. It encourages, I think, long-term rentals or families coming in more often, I'm not sure. It adds money to affordable housing, is what this citizen explained to me.
It's certainly something that we could consider doing. As a tax, it would have to, I think, go back to the voters again. So this could be ripe for next year. We have never really discussed it in any detail. I know that there are communities, and I don't know of any in Colorado that have this the vacancy tax, but I have definitely heard about it in other resort markets. It would seem like something that would be appropriate to consider. I know Whistler, for example, requires that everything in the core downtown that's residential, everything has to be either it has to be year-round occupied by a tenant or the owner, or available for rent year-round.
Wow.
And so it can't. So you could address that problem that way too. I mean, I'm probably going to get killed by all the 45% second homeowners or whatever that have large houses here that don't want them occupied. But other communities have sort of approached this in different ways, and when we were talking at the beginning of the year about what's now culminated in these 2 ballot measures, the property tax measure and the sales tax measure, and we did specifically also consider, but choose not to advance at this time, a short-term rental excise tax on rental activities. Oh, and by the way, back to Amendment 74, regulation of short-term rentals at all, guess who's going to sue the town over that? Every homeowner that wants to rent, saying, hey. And the Amendment 74 is so poisonous that there's suggestion that it could be applied to retroactive decisions. So our regulation that exists today on short-term rentals within the historic residential zone could be challenged if Amendment 74 passes.
Wow.
Don't vote for Amendment 74.
Right.
Because we need the power to do that, and we might need to expand that regulation type activity in other parts of town. So it's a fair question.
If the citizens want the town council to talk
come to
about
public comment or email us, call us, and encourage us to start that conversation. And I don't know how it works in these other communities, but we can certainly run it to ground, and we'll have our staff
Yeah.
research and then present
Yeah.
to all of us for our consideration. We may well visit in the next year or the year after. We may well visit the short-term rental excise tax again.
Right.
The issue there was
This seems interesting, though, because it wouldn't penalize the people who were trying to come
The
into
renters,
town.
uh-huh.
It would just charge people for leaving a house empty. I understand.
or encourage them to.
to either rent it or to come to town more often, spend
But
more money here.
couldn't that potentially encourage short-term rentals? So, but I guess if it's an empty house anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe
Short-term
short-term rental in that
yeah.
location would free up other stuff to become,
To be
or
more
revert
long-term.
back to
Yeah.
long-term.
Yeah.
It's a
I don't
fair,
know.
it's a good question, yeah.
It's an interesting question.
All right, we'll
what
take it
else
to
haven't
heart.
I asked you about that you want to talk about?
That's really it. I mean,
think we've talked about a lot of
everyone
good
is
stuff.
so focused on the election, and I think
Yeah.
we're also
Yeah, go vote. How about that?
hopeful that
Yeah.
we'll end up at the national and the state level with good leadership and with people who actually care about Telluride.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
thank you,
As
Sarah.
you do. Thank you, Sean.
It's my pleasure as always. Thanks
Take
a lot.
care.